So, thank you very much for your patience. As some of you probably noticed, we were a bit irritated by the wrong weather forecast because everything was prepared to do the exhibition opening at the outside, but the moment we wanted to start, it started to rain, so we had to bring everything inside. And the reason why we wanted to make the exhibition opening outside is that the two models you see here inside are very, very fragile. So before I start with the official opening, I really want to ask for being careful with the models. Is it in your sense? Yes. Okay. So everybody took the time for coming in. Great. So, dear Adrian Verscure, here on my side, dear Nikolaus Hirsch, dear friends and new visitors to the gallery. I would like to welcome all of you to tonight's opening of the exhibition BAUKUNST Incomplete Works. I'm very glad that tonight we have the great possibility to explore the work of BAUKUNST and the work, no, I want to say the work of Adrian Verscure and his team, plus to have you all here, so a very warm welcome to you and your team. Yeah, applause. I mean, Brussels is not that far, but you are a busy guy, and so it's a really travel. Okay. Most of you know that we always invite a guest who will share his insight to help us to understand the show. I'm very glad that this time Nikolaus Hirsch accepted the invitation. A very warm welcome to you as well. Before I will hand over the microphone to Nikolaus, I would like to say some words on my point of view. I'm very happy that we have the great installation here at the gallery, and I'm hoping that you're with me. On the one hand, there is the title, Incomplete Works. It sounds maybe a bit paradoxical in the world of conventional architectural thinking. So, because normally architects used to do work for hopefully hundreds of years. So the question is, what do you mean with incomplete works? But I think we will get your perspective, Nikolaus, after this. But I am sure the show will sensitize our understanding of architectural practice, which makes two things possible at the same time in a new way. Good and solid architecture, and which is also flexible for coming changes and challenges like we experience, especially nowadays. So we all know that it sounds easy, but it's not that easy to do it in practice. On the other hand, you have the installation here with the foamwork wall, Schalungswand, which transforms the gallery space into a kind of architectural statement and proves again that the gallery is an incomplete work as well. Did you consider this?
No, but it's just
okay. So I think it's high time for presenting BAUKUNST's work at the in Berlin, and hope we will meet you here again in the future more often. On that note, I will end my short welcome, but not before saying a well-deserved welcome. My first thank you, of course, goes to Adrien and your team. I'm very happy that you came to Berlin, that you did so much work to do this exhibition. My special thank goes to Paul Hensken. You were in charge of the exhibition concept. And the second special thank you goes to Roxana Lagrelle. Roxana? Yeah, because you were responsible for the installation here on site. But all this would not be possible without the generous support by Wallonie Brussels Architecture. Oh, je ne parle pas français. I do not speak French, but I hope it's clear what I wanted to say. Wallonie Brussels architecture? In a way? Okay, maybe afterwards you can explain to the people what you are doing. I was talking to Nathalie Brison, who is head of WBA. In this context, I also want to say thank you to the gallery sponsors, FSB and Jung. And now it will be your turn, dear Nikolaus. As an architect, together with your colleagues Andreas Höfer, Wolfgang Lorch, and Andrea Wandel, you built some iconic buildings. You were teaching later on at Städelschule in Frankfurt am Main. You were one of the curators of the last German pavilion at the Architecture Biennial in Venice. Since 2020, you are artistic director of the CIVA in Brussels. Plus, you have done numerous publications. It means you have an overview both on the international and the Belgian architecture scene, and I'm really curious on your perspective on Baukunst and incomplete works.
Yeah. Thank you, Ulrich, for inviting me, and also thank you, Adrien, for probably proposing me to speak as a presumable expert on Brussels architecture. But of course, I haven't been that long in Brussels, but it's also from a German perspective or international perspective, the architectural scene in Belgium primarily is incredibly interesting, and I guess most of you who come from architecture are aware of maybe a decade of a very strong international presence of Belgian architects. And when I arrived in Brussels 2 years ago, I of course tried to look a bit behind the curtain, yeah, behind what became this kind of Belgian vague maybe 10 years ago. And I met Adrien and Baukunst, and it was obvious it's not an easy work to see at first, but it became very clear that this is a really intriguing approach. It's really one of the key practices in Brussels and Belgium. And of course, it's typically Belgium. It's hard to say what the identity is. Yeah? And that's why I think Adrien has built since 2010 an office which has very international scope and presence. So it's hard to reduce that practice to Brussels, but that's probably typical about Brussels. And so much maybe about Belgium as a context. I'll come to that later. Also what it means, what is architecture today? And how is it negotiated? Because I think we all see that the criteria of architecture and of building in general today is changing dramatically. So what we witness is a systemic change, and architects usually are the last ones to realize that, unfortunately. But in that sense, I think this exhibition here by Baukunst is a really intriguing one because it proposes a very particular approach to time. And the very title of the exhibition, Incomplete Works, is a clear indicator, besides the fact that it's, of course, also an ironic statement of a mid-career architect who refuses the idea of showing something like complete works, but that's maybe a side effect. I guess the main issue here is to think about the relation between architecture and time. And there's a reference also in the exhibition to Bruno Latour, who once said that one of the key problems of architecture is that it's usually practiced and thought without the element of time. And I remember also from my own practice as an architect, you usually work against a timeline. Yeah? There's a date fixed as for completion, and then you kind of, if you're successful, you kind of hand over a key and then it's done. So there is usually a trajectory of time which usually has an end. And what this exhibition here proposes is a very large duration of time where, in an interesting way, sometimes the beginning is not clear and also the end is not determined. And I think this creates a very particular situation for an architect to position herself or himself, because you somehow have to write your own brief. And that's, I think, what's a real necessity today. And this dimension of time is not only present in a project as in paper or on a computer or on a construction site. It's also present in this other time, which is, for instance, an exhibition. I think doing an exhibition on a project is also architecture, or doing a book. So Adrien is also someone who publishes a lot, who writes, who does books in a very specific way, or in the medium of a video, which you can see here. So I think this is probably one of the interesting heritages of architecture, of modern architecture, is this huge variety of media, so that you have to see architecture as a complementary method to think about space and time. And that's what this exhibition proposes, actually, with two very specific projects, one at La Défense in Paris, and the other one close to Zurich, which is, oh God, I forgot the English name. It's a Müllverbrennungsanlage, one of these beautiful German words, and it's incineration plant. So it's basically burning trash and generating energy. And in these two projects, what you can see is that they're highly undefined. So it's not that situation that you learn in university, later in competitions, that you're given a brief, a program, and then you kind of modulate the program, the square meters, and give it some kind of a shape. And this is a very different situation here. And maybe let's start with the project at La Défense, which is almost, you can look at it like an archaeology of modernism. BAUKUNST detected leftover spaces, residual spaces, very much underground, because La Défense is a highly artificial landscape with a lot of underground space, parking, tube stations, etc., but also these leftover spaces. And so the question was clearly, what can an architect actually do with something that literally has no program? So there is a question of function. If you reduce architecture to function, you have a problem there, because there is nothing obvious that should be done. And what you can see in the model, so it's over there, a bit hidden by you, but what you can see is a very big volume above ground, but even more volume underground, with a very heavy concrete structure in a beautiful model also, where basically a big speculation about light, about air condition happens, which might generate new relations between passerbyers, people from Paris who walk by and might actually use the space or not. So it's a very speculative project in that sense, which is incredibly real in its materiality. And but what's interesting is this dimension of time, because it, as I said before, it's really almost like an archaeological project. And I don't know where it leads to in the future. And I guess, I'm not sure whether you know actually where it goes through, but that's, I think, some of the qualities of many BAUKUNST projects, that even in their realization, when you look at them, you're often not quite sure whether they're actually completed or finished. So they're very delicate and precise and well done, but they sometimes look a bit as if there's something missing, or there might be another phase coming in the future. And the other project in Zurich deals probably with one of the big challenges of our time, energy, and of course all the waste that humanity produces. And so it's an existing plant close to Zurich, but the time dimension is huge. So there's a speculation between architecture, or what an architect can do on the one hand, and on the other side, what are the technological transformations in actually burning trash and generating energy. So it's basically a model that you can see here. It's a very abstract model where you can't see the machinery, basically. Yeah? So it's, you somehow left out everything that produces or that works with the trash, because that's the part that will change over time. You explained me that basically these technologies change every 10, 20 years. Now there's a big challenge, of course, how to separate from the burning process and from the energy, how to separate the CO2. And this is something that will come as a technology, but it's not yet solved. So suddenly, as an architect, you have to deal with that huge time dimension and create opportunities, architectures for something that is yet to come. And so it's a building for, can you say for how long? 100 years? Yeah, 100 years, planning for 100 years, but for something that is in total change, as we all know. And when we read the newspapers, I think every day there's a new legal initiative concerning CO2. So I think this, and to face that, I think is some of the big challenges of today. And I think in these architectural projects, there is, for me at least, these amazing speculation while being totally accurate in the design process. So it's somehow, if you think about the systemic changes that are happening today and the role of architects, it's a real question. Yeah. So I guess everybody understands that there's a certain necessity to change policy, to create new laws concerning CO2. Also, the building codes change very much. Yeah? So in Brussels, for instance, they will apply this year a new building code which will dramatically change the logic between new and old, because you suddenly have to prove that a new building is better than an old one. How do you do this? It's not easy. But the big question, I guess, for the architectural practice is, well, within all these very parameter-driven discussions on CO2 and the environment, what's in there for architects? And I guess there is still one big question. I would say it's an aesthetic question. Yeah? So one cannot reduce the systemic question to the sheer counting of numbers. This will not be the answer. And I think BAUKUNST shows, for me, an approach where a kind of new aesthetic is coming up that keeps architectural language in some kind of a suspension, yeah, that continues to design. It's not giving up architecture, while digging very deep into the systemic discussions. And to keep that tension and an interesting balance, this is for me one of the qualities of the works you can see here. And I think this is, for architects, one of the big tasks in the future. And it's something we are witnessing, but we are not yet seeing as a process in architecture. So I guess we are all waiting for something to happen, but probably our eyes and our methodologies are not yet there. So in that sense, the work by Adrien, for me, is one step in that direction of finding architectural solutions that are not complete. Yeah, of course, you're always asked for solutions. Yeah, it's the kind of problem solver, the architect. But it's obvious that the architect will not solve the whole problem, but you try to find your own position within the process, where you allow for certain things to happen, but you still make very strong statements. So in that sense, it's for me a very positive and creative understanding of the current challenges. And in that sense, congratulations to the exhibition, to you. I think it's a very, very strong exhibition that brings these diverse media very much together, like the model as a speculative small form to express ideas, the formwork, which is reality in a way, and I think the centerpiece is the video, which also has sound. I guess we can also turn it on at one point, because it's a very filmic idea also that's behind your work. So thank you for that exhibition.
Well, I will not make. I would like to remain peace, as you were saying. Thank you very much, both of you, for inviting us and contributing also to, let's say, the thinking. I guess this exhibition is part of a larger cycle, and we were having the chance to have few other exhibitions thanks to Nathalie and WBA. So the exhibition is part of, as I was saying, is of a series. We went first to Brussels, then to Paris, then to Lisbon, and here in Berlin. And I would say for us, it's a very nice opportunity, exhibitions, to have a space and obviously also a time to think about our position as an architect, let's say beside the practice, but also beside our teaching activities in Lausanne that we are having with students. So let's say every exhibition kind of try to dig one topic, and as you were nicely describing, this one is about time, and let's say how can we imagine an architecture that would not be necessarily finite, complete. I just want to thank also my team, Paul, and everybody, also the students. I see some face. Thank you all to be here, and I hope that you will enjoy the show. Thank you very much.
One last information I want to give, that we will have a gallery talk at the end of the show on 4th May. Yeah, okay. Because, of course, it's interesting to hear what Nikolaus explained, but it's also interesting to discuss it with the architect. And that's why we have, like we always have, a gallery talk at the end, where everybody is invited and everybody will have the chance also to discuss with you, Adrien, because, as you said before, it's a very, very interesting interest. What is the future of the architecture and also of the profession of architects. And I think it's not maybe only in 3 or 4 years. We have to find an answer by ourselves, because if we don't do so, society will find answers for us. And I'm not quite sure if we will be glad with the answers the society will give us. So you're invited for coming again in 6 weeks. Now the exhibition is open. The bar was already open before the opening. Thank you very much for coming, for listening, and have a nice evening.